Hi. Happy Monday. I am so pumped for this topic. I feel like there are like I feel like I always am pumped for this topic, but this one is close to my heart because I feel like it is one of the prime principles that I coach around. It's one of the ways I think about things most, and I think it's going to be super helpful for you today because I think we've all been in that place where we're like, things just aren't working. Things just aren't working. And not only can that become a place where we stay in confusion for a long time, but can also become a place where we really, really like screw ourselves over long term in business. So we're going to talk all about that today. I just want to say one more time, thank you guys so much for all your support, for sharing it, for sending me comments, feedback, for being part of the launch team, for listening, loving it, all those things. I just have felt so overwhelmed with the amount of love, support, grace, gratitude that we have received, Monica and I. And so thank you. New episode will be out Wednesday. So keep listening. It just gets better and better. So again, thank you guys so much for sharing. All right, so let's dive into what to do when things aren't working in your business and exactly how to fix them. The first thing is, there's a few things here, but the first thing is have a realistic view of what not working means, right? I see so often that we do one thing one or two times and we decide it's not working. Like, who has been there, right? I posted 3 times and didn't get feedback. I got on one sales call and got nervous. I, did one live stream and nobody showed up. Right? And I'm really not giving unrealistic examples here. This happens to people all the time. If you're listening and you can think of a place where you've done this in your business, let me know and give everyone a little permission here. But, I just think that so often we don't have realistic expectations of what it means when something's working. And I don't know about you, but I've never done anything in my business that worked immediately. Do you know what I mean? I've never done one live video and had it go really perfectly smooth and well and get engagement. I've never done one challenge and had it go exactly as I wanted it to. I've never done one sales call that went perfectly, right? It ended up going perfectly after my 10th video, after my 3rd challenge, after my 40th sales call, that kind of thing, right? So I think the first thing we can do is when things aren't working is know if we're looking at working in a realistic way. Have I actually stayed in it? Have I done it? Have I kept doing it? Have I gotten better? Have I improved? This is such an important starting point. Because what most people are doing in this online space is they're going, well, she said that she had a successful challenge, or she said she's always been good at sales calls, or she said that her first live video got a million views or something like that, right? And it's not that there aren't outliers, that people are always lying, although sometimes I'm sure they are. The truth is, you have to account for the norm. And the norm is it takes time to make anything work. Right? You can't go to the gym once and get a result. You can't use the new face cream once and have all your wrinkles be gone. You can't insert anything really. You know what I mean? You can't spend one day drinking more water and feeling better, it's just not a thing. And the same is true in business. You can't do something once and then decide it doesn't work. It's just that simple. So if you're listening and you've done that, can you give me an emoji? Because I've sure as fuck done that. I can think of plenty of areas I've done that in. But I think part of the reason we do this, because the online space kind of tells us, if you didn't get it right the first time, you fucked it up. That's not actually true. I talk about this with clients a lot, but every person that I would say I look up to or is successful in this industry is doing so because they've done the same thing so many times now that they have it on lock and it's working. They've been selling the same thing for 10 years, right? If you really look at a lot of the people who you look up to, that's why. because they stayed in it long enough to get good at things, right? So that's step one. Yeah, Sarah Baker's like, hi me. Thank you, Sarah Baker, for calling yourself that. I appreciate that. I just think it's a really normal thing to do, and I don't think it gets normalized enough in this space, is that what happens to almost everyone ever in the online space is that they come in, expect it's going to be easy and work right away because that's what all the marketing tells you. It doesn't, and then you're immediately disappointed and think something about you is flawed or missing or not working. Like, let's just be real. That's what happens to all of us, right? Because that's sort of like, what's going on here? And it's okay, but it's true. Kristen says definitely, right? Like, we've all been there. It's fine. So thing number one, if you feel like things aren't working in your business, is like to fully take a step back and be like, have I gotten data? Have I actually been doing this for any length of time? Do I actually even have something to prove that it's not working or to look at? Or am I just like manufacturing that my first live stream should have knocked it out of the park? Right? I mean, I think that like my first live stream was on Periscope. I don't know if anybody remembers Periscope, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened. I think one person joined who was my friend who I asked to join. And I think the other person that joined was a guy who asked to see my tits. Like, it certainly wasn't a runaway success, if you know what I mean, right? But that's okay. It doesn't mean that live videos didn't work for me, right? It just meant I have more to do, just like we all do, right? And so that's thing number one. Thing number two is become a curious observer, right? So I see this so often is that it's really hard for us to take a realistic look at our business and what's working and what's not working because we're so fucking attached to it. So it's like we can't even calm ourselves down enough to just look at what's working and what's not working. Does anybody know what I mean when I say that? It's like we're so hyped up about it that we're like, whatever it is. Live videos are just not working for me. They're not working for me at all, and I can't even, and I'm not, and I'm never going to do them again, and oh my God. And it's like so fucking charged, right? Sarah Baker said just LOL did that, right? The tits thing or the we get so worked up about it thing. Either way, both true. But like what happens is we get so worked up about our own stuff that we stop being just an observer. We stop looking at the data, right? And one of the best and fastest ways to know what's working and not working in your business and to scale your business is to actually look at data, i.e. macro. What is the data telling us? Are more clients happy than not? Are more people opting in than not? Are things going well? What are our conversion rates? What's like all the stuff, right? I could go on and on forever, right? Michelle says true. Thank you, Michelle. Sarah says the tits thing. Perfect. True story. Rest in peace, Periscope. But like, we have to become curious observers. I tell my sales mastermind this all the time. Hey, Michelle, thank you for joining me. Which is like, observe your sales process. Get curious without making yourself wrong. Notice like, oh, it works really well when I sell in this way. It seems to work less well when I don't sell in this way, right? Versus like, nothing about my sales process is working, right? It's just we get so emotionally invested. Michelle says, same thing. We can't look at our business objectively because we're so emotionally connected to it. Exactly. But we can also work to mitigate that. We can take a moment to reset and be a conscious, curious observer of our business. And for a moment, take the emotions aside and go, okay, if I were just to sit down and process, what's actually going well in my sales process right now? I'm just using that as an example, right? What's actually not going well in my sales process right now? And 9 times out of 10, if you can just sit with yourself and ask those questions for like 20 minutes and write some stuff down without letting yourself go down that road of like, and it means I suck and blah, 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 right? You will find the answer. Or if you can sit with your coach and like really objectively go through it and go, this worked well, this didn't work as well. This had a lot of people opt in. This one wasn't as popular, whatever. You will be freaking amazed at how easy it is to fix things in your business. When you bring all that attachment, all that emotion to it, here's what happens. And I think everyone listening can relate. You burn shit down that's actually working. You go, challenges don't work for me, and you never do a challenge again. Live videos don't work for me because that guy asked to see my tits and obviously I'm just not meant for this. And you never do a live video again. It's not good, y'all. It's not good, right? Because what happens is we end up doing a lot of emotional energy, or sorry, let me rephrase that. We end up doing a lot of work and expending a lot of emotional energy on something that's not even real or true. Like, i.e., like, I can't do live video now. Well, that's not real or true. What's true is that maybe I should have told my audience in advance what time I was going live, or maybe I just don't have a big enough audience yet, and I have to be okay with the fact that, like, just my one friend's going to show up for now. But the more I do it, the more people are going to show up, right? Or maybe I have to be like, you know what's working? If I really got real with myself, is that title made no sense. Right? Or maybe it's like, you know what? If I got real with myself, what's true is I picked a time where I intentionally knew most people wouldn't be around to go on live because I was nervous because it was my first time. Does that make sense? And it sounds so simplified and it sounds so like, well, no shit, I would just look at what's working and what's not. But my advice here is this. Help yourself get into the place where you can emotionally pull yourself out of the entanglement for a minute. And what I mean by that is, like Michelle was saying, we're just so emotionally connected. So it's your job to go, okay, I'm going to do some emotional processing. I grab my pen. I'm like, I'm going to do my journaling. I'm going to get myself to a place where I feel good and I feel proud of the work I've been doing and I feel solid. And then I'm going to go look at what's working and what's not. Right? And here's what I've discovered. Here's the third piece. Over many, 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 many years of being in the business arena, it's usually really simple. Like 9 times out of 10, what's not working is not this big, huge, ginormous thing that you have like all these moving parts to figure out. Does anybody agree with me? Like, have you had a problem in your business and the answer was actually insanely simple? Right? Usually it's so simple. It's just that we have to emotionally remove ourselves from all of the attachment and all of that I might be wrong and I might fail and whatever to be able to see it. And usually it's like, well, I'm just not talking about results enough, or I'm just not titling my live streams in a way that's enticing, or I'm just nervous because it's my first couple times on a sales call. You know what I mean? Like, it's usually so simple. Okay, so then what could I do? Well, I need to work on my titles more. You know, I need to make sure they're enticing. What else can I do? I need to focus on results more. Maybe I put a little sticky note on my computer that says results, and I make sure to focus on that. I'm nervous before sales calls. Maybe I take 15 minutes to do a practice beforehand and get really grounded, right? Whatever it is, like, usually the solution is so very simple. And if the solution you're coming up with is very complicated, I would argue that you probably are still really emotionally invested. Right? Any time we're solving a problem in business, it's usually pretty simple. And if it's not simple, it usually means we have a lot of emotion jacked up in it. Does this make sense? Let me know if this makes sense. Right? So being the curious observer, so useful. Getting yourself into the right mindset before you do that work, so helpful. Having a coach that can help process it with you, insanely valuable. Right? But here's what I think can happen. A lot of times what happens is we create this whole problem, and then sometimes we even do have a coach, but what happens is that coach isn't necessarily looking at things through the lens of like, what makes the most sense for this business and are we solving the right problem and whatever. They feel like their job is to run with you to every problem you create, right? And I'm not saying this is the right thing. I'm not saying anybody in particular. I'm just saying that a lot of coaches will do this. So you decide, like, whatever, let's just pick one. I'm terrible at live video. Terrible. Suck at it. Totally awful at it. And so instead of being like, well, is that true? Can we talk about it? Like, what's really going on here? Is it something that you feel comfortable doing, but it's just not something that actually fits you or your strengths? Or is it really something where you're just totally making up this story and self-sabotaging? Versus like, oh, okay, you don't like live video, no problem. Like, let's go here, 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 here. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? What about this? Do you want to do a podcast? Blah, 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 blah. right? You really want to get support that helps you look at things objectively without getting wrapped up in your emotions too. So objectively, live video may or may not be right for you, but we need to actually make sure we're solving that from the right place, not from the place of, I've created this big dramatic issue in my head. Now I'm bringing it to coaching, and then we're trying to solve this big dramatic issue that doesn't actually exist. Does that make sense? So thirsty today. So that is something that I would really encourage you, whether it's a coach, a friend, yourself, whatever. If you feel like you're solving a big dramatic issue, you're probably not really simplifying it. You're probably not really fixing what isn't working. You're probably really wrapped up in a story, right? Most of the time, my clients and I are making strategic decisions in our business. There's almost like no emotional energy involved. And I don't mean that we're not checking in with what feels good and what doesn't. What I mean is it's just a very obvious and simple next right step. It doesn't feel super charged. Does that make sense? So if you're making a decision and it feels so charged, like, oh my God, this whole thing isn't working and now I have to do something else. Like, you guys know exactly what I mean. If you know what I mean, give me an emoji, because like we have all done that. Oh my God, it's not working. Ah. That's when you know you have to like hit pause and you have to like revisit this issue. Does that make sense? Because when you're coming from that place, you're never going to make really strategic decisions about what is actually working. When you can come from the curious observer standpoint, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be very obvious what the issue is, and it's going to feel like a pretty simplistic next step, right? That's kind of it, right? So I'll give you an example of this in my business. When I initially launched, Michelle says, this is great stuff, Lacey. Been there. Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being honest and raising your hand. We have all been there. So I appreciate that, and I love that permission. But yeah, so an example of this in my business was I have a program called Value-Centered Sales. Some of you won it today if you were part of the launch team. And the first 3 times I launched it as like a group program. I think we had 10, then I think we had 23, and then I think our last launch we had 43 or something like that, right? And what I was realizing the whole time I was doing that is like, I just really don't love large group coaching in that way. I just don't, right? It was challenging for me to run the group in that sense. And it wasn't from an emotionally charged place. It was just from a realizing like, you know, I'm doing this and it's fine and I can do it and it's working. But there's something about this that simply just isn't feeling good for me. And so I want to rework it, right? And so then I took a lot of time to like give myself space to observe, well, what do I like? What did I not like? What was working really well? What wasn't working really well? And one of the things that was working really well is I was doing these upsells to intensives, and people were getting really amazing results from that coupled with the program. And it's because they had some of that individual attention too, right? And so ultimately what I ended up deciding was like, well, what feels the best to me and what's the obvious next step here is just to make smaller groups, right? Like I could just do a 3-person group, charge a much higher rate for that individual attention, get them better results, feel really good personally, make similar cash, have easier launches, all the things that were like making sense to me. I've talked to you guys about how personally launching isn't my favorite thing, right? So the point is, all of that became really clear because I stepped back the emotional energy. Because I wasn't in this place of like, oh my God, nothing about value-centered sales works. We're going to fucking burn it to the ground. Right? I was like, I've done it a few times. I've stayed in it. I've kept trying it. And at the end of the day, it's not feeling how I want it to feel. So I have to figure out what my next best step is. And then once I was like, oh, I'll just do like smaller groups, because based on looking at like what's working, what's not, where are people getting results, where am I feeling good, where's the overlap? It was just so fucking obvious. But what would have been easy for me to do is be like, value-centered sales doesn't feel good and I'm burning it to the ground. And honestly, that's what most people do in their business, right? And then they're like, what next? What program am I going to create next? And then what happens is they go create another program called whatever, something else around sales or something around visibility or whatever the fuck else, and they frame it the exact same way, and then they're like, I'm still not feeling good here, what's going on? Because they're just building and burning, building and burning, building and burning. They're not taking time to be like, well, what about this is actually working? What's feeling good? What's not? What's actually coming up for me? What's happening here? What am I feeling? What are my clients feeling? What's going on? Hi, I'm back. This happens to me like every time I go live, you guys. Does anybody know what this is? Is this like something I'm manifesting, or is this the thing Facebook's doing? Available for either. But if you know, if it's a Facebook thing, tell me. If not, I need to work some shit out in my head because this is annoying AF. Is it not? It is. So that was my point about value-centered sales. But, you know, again, like sometimes we just catastrophize and we get really wrapped up in the like, this isn't working, so it goes, versus like, what about this can I make work? Like, I feel so insanely grateful that I was able to like actually look at value-centered sales in a really logical way. Thank you guys for coming back. I don't know. Does anybody know? If you know if this is me manifesting this or if this is Facebook shit, you let me know because we're going to figure this out. But anyway, so where was I? Oh yeah. So I'm like so grateful that I was able to take that stance with value-centered sales because I had all this collateral that I had built up, right? I created the entire program. It was amazing and fantastic, quite honestly. And, you know, we had had amazing testimonials and people going through it. And so instead of just like getting rid of this thing, like I'm so insanely grateful that I was able to look at it the right way, figure out really what was working and what wasn't, right? And completely step into that and make it work for me rather than burning down the asset, right? Like, again, it's just so simple to do that, like burn down the thing. And when you can actually take a step back, when you can be a curious observer, when you can detach from all the emotional entanglement, when you can stop making yourself wrong about it, it's so fucking easy to figure out what's working and what's not and take the next right step from there. When everything you do gets a check mark in the box of it works and it stays, or it doesn't and it goes. It's so intense, right? So hi, Jillian. Hi, Leah. Hi, Monica. Thank you guys for joining me. If you're here, say hi. Sorry again that Facebook keeps kicking me off. I think we just bring good energy. So anyway, if you can figure out all of that, figure out what's working, what's not, and really step into it, it's so much easier. So I'm going to use a couple different examples here because you guys know I love to use other examples outside of business. But one is in relationships, right? So if when you're in a relationship the whole time, every single piece of feedback gets a check mark in the it's working or it's not working box, like, I know, Debbie, it's so funny. I don't know what's going on. Good thing we're resilient and we fucking make it work every time, right? So if you're in a relationship and like your partner says one thing and you're like, it's not working, we're breaking up. And they say another thing and you're like, it's working, we're getting married. And you constantly are in that mentality, the likelihood that you have a happy relationship that you don't eventually burn to the ground is pretty much zero, right? But if you can be a conscious observer and step back and just be like, listen, I feel good when you do this. I feel less good when you do this. How can we tweak it? It's so much easier, so much better when you're like, I'm going to break up with you for saying that. And then the next minute you're like, I love you and we should get married. It's just like not even based in reality. It's just like this crazy manufactured thing in your head. And we do the same in business. Like, value-centered sales, I love you and you're staying in my business forever. Fuck you, this isn't working and I hate it and I'm never gonna sell this again. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's not even based in reality. It's like this charged emotion. Doesn't give us a business that actually has things that work, and it certainly doesn't give us a relationship that works. What does? Looking at the details of what's actually working and what's not, looking at the data without making everything mean stuff, right? And I know that's a fine line, but what I always say to my clients is like, do you have enough data to know that's not working? Sometimes the answer is yes. Like, yeah, we've had X amount of experiments with it. We've done it in this way. We have enough data to know that something's not working here. Cool, let's look at the data. Let's break it down. Let's figure it out. Let's take it question by question and step by step and then make a change. And again, usually the change is small and obvious and fairly simple, right? Or I'll say, do you have enough data? They're like, well, I've been posting for 2 weeks and I'm not getting engagement. There's not enough data. You posted 5 times in 2 weeks. We have no data officially, right? That's not data. Now, is there a line? Of course, right? Like we definitely want to make adjustments early on when things are not going the way we want them to, but also we cannot have these crazy expectations like I talked about at the beginning of this, where it's like, I expect that by making 4 posts over a 2-week period, I should have 10 clients. You want more clients than you've even been willing to write content for. That's not data, right? That's not a realistic expectation. Does it make sense? But when you're fully in a process, when you're like, well, I've been posting every day for a month, we can be like, cool, people are really engaging with this. People are engaging less with this. We can pay attention to this. You could be doing this more. We could change it in this way, and that's it, right? And again, it should feel simple and easy at that point because you've been in the process, you have realistic expectations, and you have data. And that's the thing with figuring out what's working and not working in your business is data is so important. Having the emotion taken out of it is so important. Being a conscious observer is so important, right? But the other piece I want to add here, and this really helps me take some of my emotion out of the game, which is like, does this thing just fundamentally fucking work? Right? Does this thing just fundamentally fucking work? And I have a bunch of examples in a point if you're like, I don't know what you mean. But like, I used to do this. I talk a lot about how I've struggled with weight over time, right? So I used to do this with like exercise and fitness programs, right? So I'd like do something, whatever something was. Like, I'm going to follow Whole30, right? And then I would say like I would follow Whole30 and then I wouldn't get the results I wanted. Then I would be like, Whole30 doesn't work for me. But like fundamentally Whole30 works. Do you see what I mean? Like fundamentally removing all the junk from your diet and eating really healthy and really clean is going to give you results. Like if you freaking follow that for 30 days, fundamentally like you will get a result. Does that make sense? And so anytime I was wanting to like burn it down, like Whole30 doesn't work for me, what I was actually not doing was going, did I actually follow up for 30 days? Do I have real data? Did I actually do the thing? And are my expectations realistic? Was I intending to lose 30 pounds in those 30 days? Well, then no, it probably didn't work. But do I actually have more energy? Was this working? Did I actually follow the plan? Those are like the real questions. Does that make sense? And so the question is, does something fundamentally work? Like live streams don't work for me. But like fundamentally, maybe live streams is a bad example. Let's use like content in general. Putting out content doesn't work for me. Fundamentally, content is what makes the world go round in online business. So there's pretty much 0% chance that content doesn't work for you. Now we can ask questions like, how are you putting out the content? How's that working? Are you doing it in a way that actually speaks to your ideal client? Blah, 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 blah. Like I could go on and on, right? But fundamentally, putting out content works. Just like fundamentally, Whole30 and eating really clean for 30 days works. Does this make sense? If you are listening and it makes sense to you, can you please give me a yes? Or an emoji or whatever the F. But let me know if you're picking up what I'm putting down. But I think that this is the part that we so often skip because we are so emotionally charged, is that we're so quick to be like, right, like I'll use the value-centered sales example again. Large group programs do not work for me. That really wasn't true at all, right? But if I had decided that and burned down value-centered sales, like nothing about that would work. Did we change from a large group program? Absolutely. Do large group programs not work for me? No, that's not true at all. Does that make sense? So in figuring out what's working and not working in your business, you really have to be able to detach enough to look at it as an outside observer. And if you can't, you really need a coach that can do that, and that won't race with you from problem to problem to problem. That won't be like, oh my God, content doesn't work for you. Let's get you networking. No. Content fundamentally fucking works. How do we talk about that more? And there's a very big difference. Sharon says yes. Thank you, Sharon. There's a very big difference between like, this doesn't fit me and I don't want to do it, versus like, I'm literally creating this story that this thing doesn't work for me. Like maybe I don't want to do Whole30 forever. Maybe that doesn't ultimately fit me, but the story that Whole30 doesn't work for me is just not real. Does that make sense? And so the same thing in the online space, like it is okay to have strengths and preferences and all of that. But the way to take the emotion out of it is to be like, this thing fundamentally works. So how can I look at it from a realistic standpoint in my business, right? Versus like, I must be the outlier where all this stuff doesn't work for me and now I have to burn it down. That's where I see people work so hard and get so frustrated because they're always trying the next thing. They're always doing something new, right? And again, there's a difference between something being best for you and something fundamentally working. But at the end of the day, most of the time, you're not going to know that right away. Those first few live streams are going to feel scary as fuck. Those first few sales calls are going to feel like a fucking mess, right? Those first few times you put out content, you're going to feel like your content sucks way more than everyone else's around you. And that's the thing. That's where we usually go, and it's not working. Because we want the out. We want to be able to burn it down. We want to be able to cut bait. We want to be like, see, I can't do this sales thing. No. You know? So I really want to encourage you, if you're watching this, if you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make, like, I think things aren't working. I'm stuck. I don't know what my next step is. I'm going to like very specifically tell you what to do. Okay. I want you to do some journaling, get yourself in the right place where you are at the place where you're like, I feel good. I believe this business is going to work. And ultimately, I believe I've been doing the best I can. I don't care if you have to journal for 2 hours, go on a walk, talk to a friend, meditate, whatever. Like, get to that place where you're like, baseline, like, I know I've been doing the best I can. I fundamentally feel good about this business and it working. And what was the third thing? And I just feel good in general, right? Like we're here, we're good, we're hanging. Then I want you to go look at your business process step by step, whatever the thing is that's not working. So like I'm saying live streams aren't working. Or maybe a better one is like sales. I hear this in sales all the time. I'm bad at sales, sales don't work. Okay, so once you're at that baseline, I want you to literally ask yourself, like, what has worked for me in sales? There better be some answers there. Right? Even if you've never made a sale, I bet something that's worked for you is like starting a relationship with someone and connecting, or posting in a Facebook group and getting some engagement or whatever. What is actually working? Right? What has worked before? What is not working right now? If most people are being honest when they're saying sales aren't working, one of the number one reasons is they're just not selling very much. Right? But it takes a lot of energy and effort to get to the place where you're answering that question. But I will tell you that most of the people I know that are telling me that they're not good at sales and sales don't work for them, their number one issue is sell more. And it's so simple and it's not charged and it's such an obvious next step. Well, I want to make more sales, so I sell more. But again, to get there requires getting yourself to a good place and asking the right questions. What's actually been working? What's simply not working? If this wasn't my business, what would I say? I do that with myself all the time. If my business was my client's business, what would I say? And honestly, I have a different answer most of the time. When it's me, my answer is like, oh my God, I don't know, and da-da-da, and we should probably do all these things. When I'm like, if this was a client, I'm like, okay, yeah, you like need to do one fucking thing. Right? So what would I say if this was a client? Whether or not you're a business coach, like if a client presented this problem to me, what would I say? Right? If you can get there, it is so easy to fix things that aren't working in your business. And this is how you accelerate growth, is because you're not building up and burning down things. Like I said about value-centered sales, you're figuring out what works, and then you're using the asset, right? So you're using that same program you designed, but you're slightly tweaking it. You're using all the same content you have planned, but you're leaning into results more. You're taking that one sales post that you wrote and you're making 4 more of them. You're not scrapping your business and starting tomorrow as a different kind of coach because you're not making sales, right? So my call to you, if you're listening, is to give yourself the space to actually process and or get a coach that can help you do this without running from problem to problem with you. Because again, usually the solution is so obvious, it's so clear, and it's such an easy next step. I literally had a client go through this last week. She was like, I think my whole sales process is off because this one thing isn't upselling in this way that I want it to, and and was just like spinning. And I was like, no. Right? Because she kind of wanted to like light the whole thing on fire, as we all do. Like that urge is there, right? So I was like, no, I want you to go, but like permission to light the whole thing on fire if you want. But first you have to process this, and we at least have to take data to the new thing. But truthfully, like you're not going to want to after you look at it all. And so she went and looked at it all and shared it with me and was like, honestly, once I like sat down and really asked the right questions and really looked at the process, it was so obvious I had like one small thing to tweak. And if I tweak that one small thing, everything else is already working. And that's what we miss so often in focusing on this isn't working, is that most of the stuff is usually working, right? Like most of our sales process might be working, but we're just not speaking to results. Or like most of us putting out content might be working, but we're just never asking anybody to take another step with us. That kind of thing. So it should feel really simple. It should feel not charged. And 9 times out of 10, you should be using the assets you already have instead of finding yourself burning them down over and over again. You should be staying in the process that you've already built instead of finding yourself going outside of that process all the time. And if you have support, you should be getting support that generally keeps you on the path you've decided on and in that process, and not shooting off to the side every time something comes up that feels bad, right? And this is the difference between running a business really strategically and running a business really reactively. Reactively is like, I'm triggered because I'm not meeting my expectation as fast as I want to. And so I'm going to make all of these sweeping, crazy decisions in my business because of it and burn down a lot of what I've already built. Strategically is these 10 things are working and these 2 things aren't. And so our next step is to fix these 2 things and lean into the 10 things, right? So I hope that was helpful. I really cannot stress this enough because I just see so many people work too hard and feel super frustrated by not looking at things this way and by really catastrophizing and making it much bigger than it needs to be. And again, like I know that's easy to do, and I know it's almost impossible to remove yourself emotionally from your business. But if you can bring that baseline energy to it and look at it from an outside perspective, I promise you're going to feel so much more relieved. So if you were feeling anxious before this, I hope this brings you relief, because the solution is probably pretty simple. You just have to be clear enough to see it. So I hope that helps. I hope you give yourself permission to go do this, to go get in a good place, and then ask yourself some really good questions, to look at your business as an outsider and to really get real with yourself. Like if I got real with myself about like a lot of the things I've done this about in the past, like dieting or whatever, 9 times out of 10, like I just wasn't doing it. I was like making it up in my head that I was like working so hard, but the truth is I wasn't actually doing it. Right? Or I was doing it, but I was like also eating whatever, 5 pieces of cake on the weekend or something. I'm just making that up. But you see what I mean? And if I could just get real with myself about that and be like, well, this fundamentally works, and what I'm not doing is this, I have so much freedom because I'm at choice there. I can keep eating the cake, but I'm probably not going to get the result I want. But I'm at choice. Versus when we get into that it's not working mentality, we give up power and choice. So at the very least, this exercise will bring you back to choice. You may choose that you want to do the live streams. You may choose you want to keep doing the sales calls. You can choose not to too, quite frankly. But being at choice and seeing that your choice is what's going to dictate your results, that is magic in business. So if you feel like something isn't working, you need to figure it out, bring yourself back to choice, and know that your choice dictates your results, because from there, anything is possible. Right? But from that place of, I just don't know and it's not working, everything feels out of our control. And that's when it's hard to run a sustainable, successful business. So if you want more of this, I would love for you to listen to literally my podcast. I take a client and we record all of her sessions for 6 months and put it on the podcast. And I share with you, I do some clip-ins and share with you like why we're doing what we're doing. But you'll see that there where like I'm really focused on keeping her clear on solving the right problem, taking the strategic next right step, not flying off onto 30 different paths, right? Because ultimately it should be easy to fix what's not working if you really stay a curious observer. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys listened to literally. A new episode is coming out Wednesday, but there's already 3 on there that you can listen to now. So hope you have a beautiful week. Thank you for sticking with me through the live stream jump around, and I love you all, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.